Chapter 7, Part 3, Homelessness. After that fateful altercation with Mom had 2 court cases hanging on her, as she was both charged in family court and civil court that she had to attend on July 24th for an official verdict, where she had been found convicted for because there was an overwhelming amount of evidence of the atrocious distress she had put me through. I remember that day so well because Grandma was under great stress and pressure when the date was approaching, to the point that she didn't give me a moment of peace. Mom, to this day, complains and blames Murad for her conviction, not particularly finding herself at fault, in which I'd like to give myself the liberty to say that Mom had earned those court dates and legal trouble with full justice. In consequence to the verdicts, Mom was prohibited from both seeing me and contacting me at all times for the duration of half a year. My aunt was furious at me for subjecting Mom into that legal trouble, and she was trying to get an eye for an eye. Grandma endlessly criticized me for it, that I couldn't find a moment of rest and solitude. Everybody turned against me, which felt like I was Israel surrounded by sure enemies in every direction. It felt suffocating, like the walls closing in on me. Regardless of all those issues, Grandma finally arrived to the decision that even though I quote-unquote misbehaved and rebelled against her authority and Mom's, I finished 10th grade with flying colors, for which she believed I deserved a small vacation. The Senior Citizen Trip Committee was arranging a sightseeing vacation to Virginia, which I unhesitatingly agreed to it because both my mind and body needed some kind of form of break. One of the major highlights that is worthwhile to note is that we explored Native American reservations, where we saw a natural bridge that was formed by our own Mother Nature. The tour guide explained that it was formed through the course of 150 million years of erosions and rivers streaming down, carrying the sediments that had compiled upon each other to form this spectacular bridge, which I do not believe that it happened in that course of time, because biblically speaking, the earth is under 6,000 years old since the time of creation. But that is for another discussion in my sequel. The facts remain that the bridge is 122 meters tall, which is 400 feet tall. And as you walk under it, the feeling and the sight is breathtakingly flabbergasting, which makes you feel a sense of some kind of divine shelter as it stretches over you. The air was freshly satiating, which gave me a renewed sense of being. The tour guide further explained that the Native Americans believed that when one walks under it and makes a wish, it would unavoidably come true. I wish that I would find myself living with Murad one of these days with desperate earnestness. Did the wish come true? That is to come. When vacation was over, trouble was not in the nearest sense over. The atmosphere in the house continued to grow increasingly tense and hostile, for which reason I was avoiding confrontations with Grandma at all costs by spending as much time anywhere but the house. I volunteered, spent time in the Finkelstein Memorial Library doing my homework, visited Mordecai, strolled around at the late hours of the night, listening to music, babysat, and only stayed in the house to eat, shower, and sleep. I minimized conversations with Grandma as much as was physically possible because the conversations grew into unbearable provocations. I also had a contradicting spirit and did everything the opposite of what Grandma was asking because I hated her tireless pursuit of control over me. Grandma complained to my aunt, and my aunt felt that I was unmanageable, especially for elderly Grandma, which partially had been true. Occasionally, the both of them threatened me with the police if I wouldn't obey. For example, I was instructed to be at home at a certain time. After I came home past Grandma's curfew, Grandma called my aunt, who called the police. She asked him to take me away for disobeying Grandma by walking at night without her permission. The problem was that during the time the call was made in accusation of my disobedience, I was already at home after a spiteful walk anyway, for which reason the police nullified my aunt's urgency of getting rid of me and refused to come. I wasn't afraid of neither my aunt's nor Grandma's threats at all. I knew that it was just a way to get a mind control over me. Over time, Grandma became uneasy jealousy of my extended absence throughout the day and deliberate avoidance of her, which made her feel lonely, and she started taking it extremely personally. On top of that, she was becoming very jealous of Mordechai spending time with me when she didn't get to have a part of me. On August 8th of 2007, all of these grievances exploded on another fateful day. As was customary, I was walking after a day's work at my volunteer position at the Metropolitan at around 4 o'clock in the afternoon, after which I always went to visit Mordechai. My plan was that I stay there until it was time to go to sleep. On my walk home, Dad gave me a call from Israel, and he told me that my aunt called him, asking him if he would be willing to take me back to Israel. Father was understanding that it wouldn't be fair to me to make that decision behind my back, and he told me what he had said to my aunt. I told her that you are not some kind of doll that you can get to play around with and get rid of whenever tired and bored, that you already got used to the school and to conditions, and it wasn't fair to tear you away from it against your wishes. I agreed with Dad, but he said that he was willing to take me in if I wanted to come back home. Truthfully, despite my troubles, I no longer wanted to return because I was deeply invested in school. But on a side note, I knew that those were just talks and threats because I knew Grandma would not allow it. On top of all that, Dad had cautioned me that Grandma would try to provoke me and that I should ignore and avoid her provocations at all costs. That was not news to me, but for some reason there was some strange urgency in Dad's voice. I dismissed it and told him not to worry. After I finished my conversation with Dad, I came to Mordechai. Mordechai seated me down and with grave importance started the conversation. Your grandma called, he informed. What did she want? I asked annoyingly. She wanted to have the opportunity to come down here and create peace to resolve the friction that has been happening between you two. She sounded desperate, he explained calmly. After he put it that way, I quickly began to gather my stuff and head towards the door. I have no interest in her peace talks. I hastened under my breath as it peculiarly felt like it would be a perfect opportunity for her to quarantine me into provocations. I really believe you should give her a chance, Mordechai insisted. I screamed, no! Mordechai blocked the door and screamed back at me in an unsettling manner. I will fuck the shit out of you if you come out the door. I'm not twisting his words. This was exactly what he said. Resignedly and somewhat frightened by his state of urgency, I sat back down, but something deep within me felt that this was trouble. He called Grandma, and she was calming down. My heart beat anxiously at the idea of her confronting me. Grandma came and sat by the table in a sovereign stateliness that she finally succeeded in locking my freedom and my contentiousness against her that had forced me to hear her out. As I predicted, Grandma started with words of provocation, such as, if I were not going to listen to her, I would be sent back to Israel, that I'm just like my father, that my place is in jail, and that I'm mentally ill. Those are the few accusations that stick out in my memory. But she talked endlessly, and I felt the heat of anger rushing through my entire system. I needed to get fresh air and simmer down, since even my face was becoming hot and red, because I felt that I was exploding inside. The tones between us were rising, and both of our breathing started getting out of rhythm, filling the air with inconsistent cadence. Unfortunately, all the more I sensed that there was something not so peaceful about the gradual but deliberate augmentation and exasperation of tones from both sides. Mordechai couldn't understand what was spoken because it was in Russian. At one point in the peace conversation, I decided to take matters into my own hands because I couldn't take it any longer and the conversation wasn't going anywhere, as it seemed to be a war of dominance. I told Grandma that I would count 5 seconds backwards and then I was to leave, but she was insulted that I interrupted her peace, quote-unquote, peace speech. Eventually, I counted till 0 and rose up to leave towards the door, at which time Grandma instinctively blocked my way to it. I pushed with my chest against her, trying to remember my dad's warning not to allow her to provoke me and keep it all together. But when I pushed against her, Grandma grabbed me by the hair, and we started wrestling like cats. Although I would confess that Grandma's beating was incomparable to the level of Mom's beating, where its intensity was so great that I couldn't defend myself. Grandma was still strong physically and a good opponent despite her elderliness, since her gymnastic occupation had built her stamina through the years. I found my way on the floor, and I was pushed into the side closet and broke its door. Mordecai, seeing all the result of our peace talks, stood helplessly because if he tried to intervene, he would have gotten hurt. As I was on the floor, Grandma stood over me, spit on me, which made me feel like dirt, grabbed me by the throat, and out of panic, I bit Grandma's arm with all of my might. We wrestled some more, and I gave up. All frazzled and disheveled, I was drained of all mental and physical strength. I barely crept to the sofa and said, "Grandma, you win. Leave me alone." "Where are your keys?" she asked in belligerence as we both huffed and puffed. There was silence. Then she screamed, "Give me your keys now!" "I don't know where they are," I screamed in ultimate submission. She looked around the space where we fought, and she found them on the floor, picked them up, and confiscated my keys that were attached to the cell phone and where I had my library card. After she found them, she felt victorious and stormed out the door as it thumped loudly after her, and she finally left me. I became officially homeless. Luckily for me, she left her own cell phone on the table. I took a long breath and started crying. Grandma's gesture was undeniably hurting. Mordecai was paralyzed by shock, trying to still process all the events. Then he sat by me and eternally put his hand over my back and patted it, trying to calm me down. "I never thought your grandma was capable of all that. You were right. I shouldn't have allowed her to come in. I underestimated the level of the conflict. I'm deeply sorry for allowing this to happen and not being able to stand up for you," he told me in condolences as his helplessness reflected my own. "Don't worry, this was bound to happen anyway," I uttered as I sobbed. "Stay here for tonight and we will figure out what to do tomorrow," he imploringly suggested. However, I no longer saw Mordecai's house as a haven that distanced me from my problems, and I was resistant to staying. "No, Mordecai, I'm going to leave," I sobbingly uttered. This time, although Mordecai felt the opposite way, he gave in without any attempts of insistence. I grabbed my stuff, Grandma's cell phone that she forgetfully left on the table, and left. I went through the streets, unable to focus on my surroundings as tears forced their way through my eye sockets. I tried to hold myself together as if everything was all right when I saw a police car driving by so that it wouldn't stop and ask me questions of my distress, for which I would owe an explanation. I also remember David Davidson's caution of not slouching and looking to the ground in defeat because it makes you look like a good victim. But I couldn't help myself because, as much as I denied the reality, I was the ultimately defeated victim, as my own honor was deprived of me. Then I got to Finkelstein Memorial Library, washed my face in the bathroom, and asked the librarian to give me access to the computers because I didn't have a library card. I explained to her that it was an urgent matter. I wrote Murat an email through the river of tears, telling him that I loved him, but I abstained from telling him my state of mind. He responded in an email telling, "How many times have I told you not to tell me this?" I stayed in the library until 9 p.m. trying to do homework and concentrate, but I had to leave because the library closed. As I was trying to figure out what to do next, I decided to call Tolik up, and he knew that what had happened somehow. He told me that he was trying to talk to my grandma and saw my aunt there, who said that I should kiss grandma's feet for forgiveness to let me in. I said to him that I would never stoop so low. I decided to spend the night at the football field at our school, and I lay on the bleachers staring at the open nocturnal sky and listening to my Walkman. Inextricably, I felt intolerable streaks of loneliness, devoid of human contact, that I finally made up my mind to call Murat on Grandma's phone. "Why are you calling me from this phone so late? Where is your phone?" Murat sounded worried. "Murat, just talk to me." I dodged his questions and begged as my voice was raspy and shuddering. "Are you crying?" he asked with concern. "No," I said. I said it as heaps of tears were rushing out of my face in contradiction. "What happened this time?" Murat demanded to know. "Nothing. Just talk to me." I continued to be evasive. "Fine. If you don't want to tell me what happened, I will call Grandma and find out." Murat posed the ultimatum. "No, Murat, don't call her. I will tell you what happened." I surrendered. After I finished narrating my soap opera, Murat made a long sigh and said, "Where are you now?" "I'm not telling." I went back to shutting him out like a rebellious child. "Just talk to me until my battery dies," Murat asked in destitution. "Alina, you have two choices. You either go back to spend the night at Mordechai's, or if you don't want to go to Mordechai, go to Yolanda, or I'm calling the police to find you. It's dangerous for a girl like you to be out so late at night all alone." He made another simple ultimatum. When I heard the word police, I said, "No, don't call the police, please." I cried beseechingly. Then make a decision to go either to Mordechai or Yolanda. Murat didn't back out. "I don't want to go to that building. Yolanda is a stranger. Why don't you understand?" I cried. "Alina, you have no choice," he said it authoritatively. He tried to convince me to go until I relented. I went to the building, and in order to get in, I had to have keys to open the building, but I didn't have anything, so I had to ring to Mordechai, who answered and opened the door from his apartment by pressing a button. I came to his apartment, and it was 2:00 in the morning. Mordechai looked more distraught than when I left. "The police were here with your aunt." Mordechai broke the silence. "Mordechai, I don't care if the world would officially be over right now," I said in carelessness. "Sleep in my room with me for tonight. The couch is uncomfortable," Mordechai insisted. It was true that his bed was a lot more luxurious, and I agreed to the idea. I collapsed into his bed and chased all thoughts of what was awaiting me tomorrow. Mordechai and I slept side by side, and he didn't touch me.